Hi everyone, and welcome to the Light Photography Techniques video lecture. Let's get started. In the exposure triangle video lecture, I talked about three camera settings that affect exposure of an image: the size of the aperture, the speed of the shutter, and the ISO of the sensor. But I left out one important component: light. All three of these settings rely on ambient light, meaning the natural state of the lighting in the area. While manipulating the settings on the camera can provide proper exposure in ideal conditions, there are often situations in which you will get an improperly exposed image regardless, because the ambient light is going to impact the exposure in some way. In those cases, we have to supplement the ambient lighting with something extra. So for this video lecture, I want to discuss the conditions where we typically require extra light and also how to properly utilize external lighting to provide proper exposure in crime scene photography. So first, let's talk about some of the specific situations that photographers may find themselves requiring more than just ambient light. First, scenes with very low ambient lighting, like an outdoor scene at night, or an indoor crime scene with no electricity. These typically require additional light in order to ensure that details are not lost in the darkness. Another situation where extra light may be needed is situations where there are irregularly shaded areas in the photograph. For example, in a few minutes, I'm going to show you a photograph of some evidence underneath a car. In the same photograph, there are areas outside of the car with no shade, areas right next to the car with soft shade, and then there are areas fully underneath the car that's in hard shadow, meaning it's really dark and you've lost your detail. Adding extra light in these types of situations can help balance the exposure to prevent overexposing or underexposing the area in the image. Finally, scenes with high contrast, meaning crime scenes that contain both really bright and really dark shadows, can create visibility issues because the camera can't accurately capture details in both the light and the dark areas. Fire scenes, for example, are one situation in which you will often have high contrast issues because the fire damage is so dark compared to the non-damaged areas that it can be difficult for your camera to record all of the details accurately with just the typical ISO, shutter speed, and aperture settings. Now, crime scene investigators will also encounter situations where the exposure itself may not be the problem, but rather an extra light source is used in some way to manipulate the lighting. For example, when photographing impression evidence like shoe prints or tool marks, light is often added to the scene specifically to create contrast and to highlight the impression so as to better capture the details of the evidence. Crime scene photographers must use specialized lighting methods to create this contrast, and they do so systematically so they do not obscure or miss any details. Another situation where crime scene photographers may use light manipulation is when dealing with reflective surfaces or glass. When light is used incorrectly on these surfaces, it causes glare and can obscure evidence details in the final photographs. So photographers will use specialized lighting techniques to reduce unwanted reflections and glare issues. Overall, understanding when and how to use light in a photograph is an important skill that crime scene photographers must have in order to provide the clear, accurate, and admissible photographs for investigations and court proceedings. Now, there are three ways that we can add light into a scene. You can use the camera flash, which is located on top of the camera base. You can also use a flash unit, and that's a separate flash device that can be positioned either on top of the camera and it's used in place of the camera flash, or it can be separated from the camera and it can be used in conjunction or by itself. You can also add light to the scene by using a flashlight or a spotlight or some kind of external light source that will add additional light into the scene being photographed. In this course, you're going to get a chance to work with both a flash unit and a flashlight for different lighting techniques. There are four main lighting techniques that will be of substantial benefit for crime scene photography. I'm going to cover fill flash, bounce flash, and oblique lighting in this video lecture. Painting with light, which is a really useful technique for capturing evidence in really dark scenes, that's going to be covered in a separate lecture video. So let's first talk about bounce flash. If you use the normal camera flash, then the light flashes from directly above the lens. What happens is that when you are photographing a shiny object, the light goes from your flash, hits the object, and then reflects directly back into the lens. and that creates a glare in your photograph, and that's going to eliminate detail. In bounce flash, the flash is bounced or reflected off of a white surface that's between the object and the camera. This will brighten up the object in order to help expose the details correctly while also eliminating the potential for glare. One of the easiest and most common ways to bounce a flash is off the ceiling. Since most ceilings are white, you can direct the flash up to the ceiling and then bounce it back down to the object being photographed. If you don't have a white ceiling, or if the ceiling of the scene is too high, you can also use a white board or even a white sheet of paper to help bounce the light back to the object. The nice part about bounce flash is that it does not require a lot of fancy equipment. Flash units can usually be tilted in multiple directions, so the easiest way to take a photograph with bounce flash is to attach the flash unit to the camera, tilt it upwards towards the ceiling or towards another reflective surface, and then take the photo like normal. You can see that process illustrated in the photographs on this slide. Here's an example that illustrates the benefits of bounce flash. This item is located in a bathroom. Now, bathrooms can be really difficult to photograph because there are so many reflective surfaces that can create glare. Here you can see that the light is creating a glare in the center of the object itself, which could potentially hide detail. Additionally, the reflection of the light off the bathroom mirror is creating a dark shadow below the object that can also be hiding detail in the photograph. Now, in the second photograph, the flash was bounced off the ceiling of the bathroom. This added necessary light to the scene, but it eliminated both the glare on the object and the hard shadow below it. The problem with the shadow below the object is something that photographers encounter a lot, particularly when photographing outdoor crime scenes. On a bright, sunny day, the sun can create really dark shadows below objects. As you can see from this image, the dark shadow of the sun is stopping the photograph from showing what is actually located underneath the car. If you were to use the camera flash like normal, it would add a lot of light to the tire and to the metal pipe that are already exposed to the sun. So that's going to result in an overexposure of those areas, and then you get a loss of detail there instead of in the dark areas. So what is needed then is a light that is directly specific to the dark areas of the photograph only. In these situations, we use a lighting technique called fill flash. This requires the photographer to unmount the flash unit from the camera and to hold it in such a way that it will flash into the darkened areas, but that it won't generate a lot of light on the bright areas of the photograph. For this photograph, the flash unit was held to the side of the camera, which was, here. I held the flash unit over here, and I tilted it down towards the tire. When the image was captured, the flash adds light to that hard shadow underneath the car, and it allows for details within that area to be captured. And it also doesn't overexpose the lighter areas, so I don't lose detail on the tire and the metal pipe that's exposed. The final lighting technique I want to discuss in this lecture video is oblique lighting. Oblique lighting uses an external flash source to highlight details in impression evidence. The photographer holds the light source to the side of the object at a shallow angle, meaning that there's not really a lot of difference. It's not like this, it's closer to that direction. This lighting will create shadows in the object, which is actually purposeful because it allows for shallow details to be more clearly photographed. Oblique lighting is used for all types of impression photography, including the documentation of bite marks, indented writing, and footwear impressions. Now, because oblique lighting is purposely putting shadows into the photograph, as a result, oblique lighting requires the photographer to take several photographs. In each photograph, the light is moved to a new side of the object so that different details are highlighted and different details are shadowed. So by photographing the evidence repeatedly while moving the light, the photographer will ensure that the details through the whole impression are documented correctly. Here's an example of a photograph taken with oblique lighting. The 3D details in the footwear impression are difficult to capture when the light's projected directly onto the top of the object. So by holding the light source to the north of the object, which I held it here, it's kind of weird, but by holding it to the north of the object, the shadows highlight some of the details in the impression. Now this photograph, this evidence would actually be captured best then by taking the same image 4 times. So we're going to hold the light source to the north where it's at, then we'd hold it to the side, then we'd hold it to the bottom, and then we'd hold it to the other side. That way we get all 4 sides and we can get all the impressions details that we need. Here's another example of oblique lighting. This black paper holds a static clean lift of a footwear impression in dust. As you can see from the photographs on the slide, photographing the impression with the camera flash straight above provides really few details about the sheet. However, by holding the flash to the side of the paper, more of the dust impression is highlighted. Again, when you're using oblique lighting, it's important to play with the light around the object before you actually take the photograph. That way you can try out different angles and different sides to see what combination works best to highlight the details. So it's a little bit of trial and error. As mentioned previously, if needed, you always have the option to take multiple photographs with different lighting positions. So for example, with this photograph, I feel pretty confident, especially in the area on this side, but I think the area on the other side, I'd probably do at least one more photograph to make sure I got all the detail over there that I needed captured. Here's one more example of oblique lighting. This writing is called indented writing because it's pressed areas of the paper that remain behind when the author puts pressure on a page above. Oblique lighting creates shadows in the writing, and that helps define the individual letters, and it allows the evidence to be analyzed more easily compared to a photograph using the camera flash only. All right, well, that's all for this video lecture. Thank you for watching, everyone.